Yeah, so we've been asked to do a bit of a wrap-up, take some observations. Being analysts, it's a privilege to be able to listen to the conversations and be looked upon for some perspective. We're independent, and I would consider myself a generalist, so I don't go deep into any one area. I don't know, Bill and Ron, you can speak for yourselves, but I think it's important to have that reflection in these types of forums. So we don't want to take more than, 15 minutes at the most, get to a break, and then into your one-on-ones. So I organized some of my observations under the classic people, process, and technology, and I thought that's one way to do it. Ron and Bill, you might have your own framework. But some of the things I took away, going back to yesterday, Brian, your comment in the opening fireside chat was really stuck in my head, that notion of, as the leader of IT at Greenwind, your first meeting was with the head of HR. So it really talks about the importance of having that connection to the culture and the teams and the perspectives of the individuals that you're going to be serving and supporting in the business. So that was one of the big takeaways for me. In terms of process, a big takeaway is security, right? I talked about it in my opening keynote yesterday as it being the #1 challenge or major concern that the business has with IT. It's hanging around as a inhibitor to much of the innovation and the transformation that we want to do. I think we're going to hear a lot more about it, but we don't also want it to be a stumbling block as we move forward with our initiatives. So that's one of the process issues that can be solved by technology. But I'll stop there, and maybe Ron, to you for some of your perspectives on the first.
Sure, and I agree completely. I'm going to pick up on the people theme. In this, I'm speaking to a room of CIOs or technology leaders, by and large. And one of the biggest challenges we have, or you have, I think, is finding the right talent, having the right people. We spoke about millennials, versus the silver tsunami or whatever. And we just heard an excellent discussion about women in technology, women in STEM. This is a challenge that I'm picking it up in conversations at the tables. It's here today. It is not going to get better. So the quest to find that top 5%, the capability, the people that we rely on to get our jobs done is going to be a bit of a challenge. Further about people, again, is the idea that the technology works. By and large, in my experience, I come from a long line of technology. It used to be a day when it didn't work, but 5 nines is quite understandable and affordable now. Things that technology could not do decades ago. But it's all about change. It's all about leadership. It's all about your role, our roles in helping our organizations change. And then, as Kevin has just said, how we help our society change through the technology that's available to us. But it's helping them get across the chasm or the difficulties of seeing how it's going to be applied. So people in terms of skills, people in terms of helping them to change your organizations. But Bill, I've got a few more, but I think you might have a few on your list too.
You guys are so organized and mine's all random. But I have to comment that at the table that we had over lunch, I think that's the benefit, the primary benefit, the #1 benefit is being able to connect with people who are experiencing what you're experiencing and to listen and participate in those conversations. And that's happening for me. The fellows at the table that I was sitting at are smiling. They don't know what I'm going to say, right? But what happened is we started a discussion about what's happened in our own careers as a result of transformation. And 2 of the individuals at the table had worked in IT and the media and ended up having to change their jobs because of what digital transformation has done in the media. It has completely changed how we seek out our news, I think was the way that they were using the example. 2 other people at our table were from Microsoft, and they started telling how much Microsoft has changed to accommodate a new type of business model. And I'm sitting there thinking, these are great examples of, quote, digital transformation as we move on. One individual had a career at BlackBerry, and he was talking about it from the negative perspective. What did BlackBerry not do in terms of software that allowed them to stay as a prominent player as we were going through this kind of transformation? And I guess the thing that I would like to emphasize in this day 1 wrap-up is how much of a choice each of us has in our own jobs, in our own careers, in our own organizations to enable the digital transformation. I had the experience of working at a very large company. I'm sure most of you don't even remember it. It was called Digital Equipment, but they made the decision to get out of the software business, and that was the part I was in, and they were going to go after being a chip manufacturer, which I find amusing now. But you know, our company started to go downhill when we were being pressured to transform, when our CEO got up and said PCs were children's toys and Unix was snake oil. I remember that conference, I was just like, are you kidding me? He said that, you know, and but it, you know, and then you watch the company morph into death. I continually had to lay people off. I inherited new groups to manage, and I had to go back 6 or 9 months later and tell these people you don't have a job anymore. And the message that I got from this conversation at the table, every one of us has to make some decisions about ourselves, about the people we're working with. Peggy at breakfast talked about walking into a situation where the business was so active and she was so active, and she had an IT organization that was not responding. I'm not sure that's an appropriate way to say it. I'm sure she's talking about certain individuals, but it was enlightening. What are you doing, and what can you do as a manager to help these people through this digital transformation? This is tough stuff, and it's happening all around us and has been for some time. So I'll get off my bandbox.
That's good.
I have some other ones, but you don't want to hear them. No.
And it brings up the notion of gray areas between roles and how processes sit between what, you know, I sort of put this artificial barrier or division up when I presented some of the findings yesterday about IT and line of business, that you in fact are working together for a common purpose in most cases. And one of the challenges that we heard in one of the case study sessions with TELUS, but also at, you know, unprompted at our lunch table, was this movement of CapEx to OpEx and how hard that is to make the financial case and to be able to move in terms of thinking. Is there something that we need to touch and feel in terms of having that, you know, that box or that you know, piece of software on premise? So there still is a mindset, and it ties back to the people side as well as the technology side. The other thing, you know, I'm not surprised that AI, artificial intelligence, is, you know, very prominent at this, you know, at this forum. I think one of the things that I've learned a little bit too is that sometimes we talk a little bit too fast about what's happening 3 to 5 years out, and there's some day-to-day problems that your teams are facing just to get, you know, the right skills. How hard it is to find the right talent, the IT talent that can talk in a business language, communicate, but also be a, you know, a supreme coder as well. The other challenges relate to being able to improve customer experience and other people side things. So employee experience is extremely important as well. That, you know, that the notion that a number of staff are going to quit if you force upon them a mobile technology to check in, that was astounding to me, and it's a lesson to be learned about not to take that lightly, the notion of how that's going to change your day-to-day work activities.
Yeah, let me pick up a little bit from that. I've got 2 quick points to make, and that'll be my last. On the technology, I'm just fascinated that we've got the big and the small. We've got IBM and Microsoft. IBM, the quintessential technology company for about 100 years or so, but we've got a lot of small companies. I was with Deepak, who was on the stage here. Somebody in one of our breakouts says, well, how big is your company? He said, 10 people. And you know, this is a wonderful company that's doing great things, but it's on the same stage with IBM and Microsoft. So, and I think for you, again, as CIOs, part of the interesting part of the job perhaps is you've got the legacy, you've got the established, you've got the stuff that's been on the ERPs, the custom code that's been in place for a long time from the old companies, but you've still got to be nimble and trying the new capabilities that these young companies are bringing to the fore. And that's a bit of a challenge, but that's part of the technology challenge. And the last thing I'm going to say, Canada is different. There's no doubt about that. You know, we're a bit different. We're big. We're a little bit more regulated, perhaps, whether it's financial services or healthcare or transportation or CRTC or other things, communications, et cetera. I loved it. We heard earlier from Kevin, we're cautious laggards. And, you know, we're not quite the get out there in front of it and make it all work as perhaps our neighbors to the south. And, you know, data residency is a good example of that. We have Aboriginal communities. We have the far north. There are some things that are unique about Canada. Of course, ici à la Belle Provence, on ici bilingue. Is that the right way? I'm sorry if I've said that wrong. But we are the same. Security and privacy is an issue across all of our organizations and our societies, and that's a global situation. Everything as a service, whether it's software or cars or platform or whatever, is a model that we're all going to live with. So Canada is catching up, and I think at some point, we have opportunities to surpass what is happening in the rest of the world, but we are just a little bit different. And Bill, my American friend, what would you say to that?
Well, hey, but the point I wanted to notice is there were pearls of wisdom dropping from Kevin in this last presentation that I was so impressed with. And one in particular, I had a hallway conversation after my presentation this morning that talked about the obstacles in moving to some DX capabilities, and that I am bound with this legacy environment. And it was a very meaningful conversation. It was not to be shunned or ignored. But Kevin was emphasizing the concept of cloud. And if there's something Thrivers are doing, if it's a common task, it's gone from your IT organization. There are people available to do things that are common. And what is focused, and your need to focus on digital transformation, are those things that only you are going to be able to do for the company. And his emphasis on Azure and on other cloud opportunities and the role that can play, I thought was significant wisdom as we face what are we going to do with these legacy environments that frees us in order to be able to start spending the time on digital transformation capabilities that our line of businesses so want. It's a vice that we're in. And again, there were other things that came up in that discussion. I'm very grateful that he was here and was able to share those kind of things. So I'll turn it back to you. I'm done.
No, I agree. I think as a wrap-up, one of the things that we can talk about is what surprised you, or what was missing, or something you expected to hear more of in the first day and a half or so that we can maybe prompt the group to focus on. One thing I was impressed with is this notion of thinking about how people work in the field and how that's challenged, and some of the tools that were presented. But I also want to hear more really tangible AI use cases. IBM started yesterday talking about AI in mobile and endpoint management. And I think we need to hear more about that before it gets fully embraced by business owners and business leaders. The other thing, and I'm not disappointed it wasn't talked about, I'm just surprised I haven't heard the phrase blockchain. I'm not sure if it's been brought up. So anyway, maybe we've heard too much about it. We hosted an event that was very successful about 2 weeks ago in Toronto. And it is a super hot topic, at least in financial services. And distributed ledger technology isn't going to only impact FS, it's going to impact almost every sector. So it's just an observation, not really a requirement to talk about that for the next couple of days.
To Tony's point, we've got about 24 hours. Is there anything you'd like to hear that you haven't heard yet? Oh, this is great. They liked everything.
Sure.
See, this is great. We cannot see you, we cannot.
You're standing right below the lights.
I know, it shines a little bit. So I guess it's great talking about the clouds, but moving from being in the cloud down to device level, because I'm kind of straddling those worlds. And when you get down to the device level, you got to figure out how do we make this device secure. And I don't see any, off-the-shelf, really small operating systems that I can use. So they've got to kind of have to build their own to get it fast and secure, so no one knows about it, no one's going to hack it, we think. But then when you've got those devices, and I've been talking to some of the TELUS guys here about how do you take all that data, and maybe even not all that data, but how do you identify the independent variables? So you don't have to export all the dependent variables up to the cloud, but you just want the independent variables and minimize that transport, so that you can then really get into doing the AI side. So I'm kind of looking at it from, are we going to talk a little bit more about down at the device level, IoT, security, that level? That would be pretty interesting to me. I don't know about anybody else.
Great suggestion. Great suggestion.
We touched on that a little bit in one of the breakouts this morning in terms of who owns the data lake, and there are different architectures. Maybe you were in one of those sessions, and every business might have a different architecture or model, but it's definitely worth exploring in the next day and a half.
Thank you.